Bluetooth working, and hopefully we're synced here, and you'll have a presentation on breathing for the brasses. So I figured this would be a great way to have lectures without taking class time. We can use class time for playing for each other and making sure we're really ready for the proficiencies. But I want to talk about breathing just a little bit this evening. Breathing for the brasses, and I do have a handout available for you. It's on the content section of your course, and I can give out a hard copy in class. Some breathing concepts that I want to share with you. First of all, the breathing that we do during the day is not enough for brass players. And primarily I want you to know that I think that we do a lot of high breaths, a lot of chest breathing, instead of a lot of breathing from the entire intercostal area. So I want to show you what it's like to breathe fully from the intercostal area, which is what we need to do if we're going to be efficient and effective brass players. One way that we can experience the area, the lower area, and not just the chest part of the breathing is if we bend over on our knees and let our arms down by the sides. If I go out of camera range, I'll be back in just a second. But in this position, relax completely on your knees and then take a quick breath in as if somebody's throwing a bucket of cold ice water on you. 1, 2, 3. And what happens is, in that position, that you are pushed off of the chair because the air fills into the lower area. In fact, there's no way to breathe really into the chest in that position. The air can only come in the lower area, and all that air that comes in effectively moves you off your knees, and you can feel it really obviously. So if you haven't felt that kind of breath before, then you might not be a wind player, and you might not be a brass player, and you might need to try to develop this sort of breathing. Another exercise that you can do to try to become familiar with full lower breaths is to do this exercise, and I'm going to stand to do it. I want you to put your middle fingers together and put them in front of your stomach and put your thumbs out to the sides. Now obviously we're not thin enough to encompass our whole middle area with our hands, but simply make sure that your middle fingers are touching in the front, and then let all the air out. Take a full breath in and see what happens. And then let your air out. And I would ask the class then, as you've tried this, what did you notice? Well, most of you will say, well, my middle fingers came apart. But did anything else happen when you took that breath in, if it was a full breath? So try it again. And I hope you noticed that in addition to your middle fingers moving apart, your thumbs moved out from the sides. I hope that you noticed that. If you didn't, then you need to try to fill up more in the lower intercostal area. Because if you're really breathing full, that's going to happen. And then the last result is that you are going to see yourself sort of roll up into the chest, and the chest is going to fill too. Now some students who are very conscientious, and especially the young ones, if you say, I want you to take a big full breath, they'll do this. And they are trying to be conscientious, and they are taking in a deep breath, but it is purely chest, and it's not lower area first. I want you to know that if you take that breath in, then unless you start getting extra tense and kind of manipulating muscles of the gut, then you're really not able to take in a lot of air in the lower area, if any. It sort of locks out your lower area. So if anything, in my view, the chest fills up after the lower area fills up. Sort of like filling a glass of water, it has to fill up to the bottom to the top first. Bottom first, up to the top. So you need to try to get used to this. If you need convincing that you do this naturally, then you need to lay on your back in bed tonight. You can think about that and notice if you take deep breaths, or even if you're just kind of observing what your normal breathing pattern is, you're going to see that indeed you're coming in with air into the stomach and not the chest. Many teachers, I've known voice teachers who will have students lay on the floor and put a book on their stomach and let them breathe, and you'll see the book come off or move up with their stomach. Caution though, don't let your students be conscientious. Don't you try to be conscientious and get brownie points by sticking those muscles out. You know, all of us can look like that big fat Pillsbury Doughboy sort of guy laying on the couch by pushing muscles out. We can act fat. Do not manipulate muscles at all when you're breathing in. In fact, the only tension or manipulation of muscles while you're breathing, inhalation, exhalation, is that you begin to feel tight because the balloon has filled up, just like the balloon becomes tight. And as you control the exhalation, you'll notice that there's some natural tension if you pace the air by those resistant points, which can be the glottis and the tongue and the aperture. But that's the only resistance. It's not that we are going to tighten muscles. And I want to give you a few cautions right off. I've had students who have been told by their band directors that they must push from the diaphragm. That's impossible. The diaphragm is an involuntary muscle that simply sits here as sort of a divider, and when you breathe in, it extends down, and when you breathe out, it comes back up to its normal position. First of all, I don't want you pushing anything. Secondly, you can't push an involuntary muscle. So if you want to say breathe from the diaphragm, then I'm not going to be so upset about that. But this thing about pushing from the diaphragm is really a myth that some band directors use. And the other thing along those lines is that sometimes when that is told to students, they actually do think that they need to push muscle. Unfortunately, what they do is they push muscle out as they are exhaling. So if you can imagine this area is supposed to be shrinking as I am breathing out, but they are pushing muscle out in the opposite direction, counter to what is happening naturally. And this used to be actually a well accepted thought for brass players. This is decades and decades and decades ago, that you must push out as you're exhaling. And actually, understandably, quite a few players were getting hernias because you are absolutely straining muscle that you shouldn't be straining. So don't ever buy into that. Don't ever have your students pushing out muscle. I've actually had to retrain breathing for a couple students in my teaching time because they had been told that and were really inappropriate with their breathing. Another thing I want to caution you about when we're talking about tension is that I really don't want you to set your breath between the inhalation and the exhalation. And there is maybe a slight difference between brass players and vocalists, not really in terms of how we use the mechanism. I think we're really one and the same. But I know that vocalists do tend to, at least somebody, one voice teacher told me that they do just a little bit of controlling of muscle as they try to control the air that's used when they sing. I simply want you to take air in and use air, and in fact I often say waste air because a lot of times we don't use up enough air. I want to make sure you don't set the breath, is what I started to say, which is an inhalation and then a holding of the air and then a playing of the note or the passage or whatever. So it might look like this. What happens in that case typically is that we are starting to let the air go stale. And I always want you to have fresh air. I also want you to know that as soon as you are setting the breath, you're giving all of the muscles, including neck muscles and other muscles, a chance to firm up during that wait time. And then you start to exhale and you try to get rid of that tension, and it's very difficult. So it really is a mechanism for adding tension to your playing, and you don't want that. So do not set the breath. Kind of related to that is the fact that when you're playing, you need to use up air so that when you take a fresh breath, another breath, you're out of air and your breath in will be, in fact, a full and a fresh one. There's something else I want to say about breathing. I'm trying to look at, trying to get back in my mind and make sure I don't forget the important things to tell you. And that is that I want you to realize that breathing actually can be part of the music. We got to make our breaths musically conceived, and that's a lesson for another time. We need to use air up before we take air in. And we need to realize that when we are breathing, we are actually giving our lips, our chops, a chance to rejuvenate. The blood's going to flow again, and we're going to feel good about that next phrase. We're going to have better endurance. We're going to have more consistency. We're going to have better tone. I'm moving rather fast, but you can stop the video and think about things and then replay. You can try the exercises and so forth. I want to make another point here about brass embouchures and breathing. I want to make sure that you and that in your teaching, your students set the embouchure and the instrument first and then take the breath. There are many times where you'll see a student, and in fact I've seen one in class, where the instrument is pretty much ready to set, but the student is trying to breathe in and set the mouthpiece and play all at the same time. And there's no chance to set the embouchure. There's no chance to set the mouthpiece appropriately in that consistent spot and to take the air in all at once. So what I recommend to you is that you have your embouchure, you have your instrument position already, that you go ahead and set the instrument, then you can let go with the bottom lip to breathe before you play. Now we'll talk about me a little bit later and about my setup. I'll mention some things in class for you. So I think we've gone through some cautions. We've gone through some exercises. I'm not sure that I shared with you. Boy, if I did this at the beginning, I'll feel like I'm a little bit more senile than I thought. But either seated or standing, it would be a good idea to practice raising your arms up, taking a full breath in, and then putting your arms down at your side but not collapsing the chest. And what you'll see is that you are in a really open, chest up position to take that air in. Whereas normally when we're taking a breath in, and I'm sure I was guilty of this just a few minutes ago, when we're not thinking about it, we start our day like this, we might start our playing like this, and then breathe in, and you can see that I was rather collapsed with my chest and not as open. You can also do this from a standing position, or as one brass author suggests, put your fingers on your earlobes and take your breath in. Put them down. You can exhale and then try another breath in with your chest out of the way of your lower breathing area. So at that point you are not collapsed, you're ready to breathe low and fill in, and you're ready to go ahead and fill in with the upper chest area. So do look at the handout. I've referred to a lot of it here. One thing I don't think I mentioned is that I really want you to get in the habit of not breathing through the nose. Breathe through the mouth, just as when I demonstrated getting ready to play. There are nose breaths in brass playing. Sometimes they'll be required, but I'm not a huge fan, except when they're necessary due to musical reasons. I don't think the breath is as full, and I think you're not giving your chops a chance to rejuvenate and to see the blood flow in them. There are many other breathing exercises at the bottom of the first page of your handout. You can do hissing. Careful though, if your students hiss too much, adding a lot of tension to their neck, that's going to give them bad habits in their playing. Things that I don't have before me here, which would be great, you can have your students have an index card against the wall, stand against the wall about 6 or 8 inches from the wall, maybe as much as a foot, and blow a steady air stream and keep the index card against the wall without falling. You can do gasping for air in sips. That's the last thing mentioned, where you take a full breath in and then you sip additional air in, and that can help students realize that, wow, I thought I was full, I thought I took in all the air I could, but I actually sipped in more, and that can be an indicator to the student of what it feels like to fill more in the lower area as well. The book shows where you can take a piece of tissue paper, your Do It book, you attach it to maybe a mouthpiece ring, or you can hold it with your finger, and you breathe in and breathe out, and you use a steady airflow to keep that extended. I have an air builder exercise I want to share with you. Before I do so, just look at the bonus tips for college players that I have down here that I want to mention to you. The number 2, pressure of performance, fight or flight response. We will tend to protect ourselves in performance. I bet you when players have experienced this, where just because you're going to play for that audience or a slightly unfamiliar situation, we tend to have all those fight or flight issues. Maybe the heart races a little bit, maybe we get clammy hands, maybe we sweat just a little bit, or we get dry mouth. Something that goes along with that is that we begin to protect our breathing apparatus. I think you have to make a purposeful effort to relax the area. I think taking some full breaths and feeling completely loose in the gut is a good way to think when you're getting ready for a performance. I remind my students sometimes, if I were going to hit you in the stomach, you would really hurt. The reality is your body, if it's under pressure, it's going to tense its area here in protection of your innards, of your organs. It's going to protect itself like this, as it should. And your blood flow is going to go to your extremities so that you can run away real fast, or so that you can hit, or whatever you need to do. Well, these are not good conditions for brass playing. You need to make yourself vulnerable. And I love that word, vulnerable. We have to make ourselves vulnerable mentally to succeed or fail. We have to make ourselves vulnerable in terms of our breathing apparatus. So you must loosen up. A few other points I'll make. When you're warming up first thing in the morning, wind players and especially brass players, this apparatus is going to be tight, just like a balloon is tight before anyone has blown it up. And so some breathing exercises are going to be very valuable for you to loosen up that balloon, much like you do to get a balloon kind of started, a little less stiff, and then you go about filling that balloon up with air. There are other points down here that I could make, which are the bonus tips, but I'm not going to include those on this video here. I'm going to let you read them. I do want to show you my playing exercise that I think is an excellent one for talented high school students, even middle school students for that matter, as long as the pacing is correct, college students or professionals. And that is, it's a breath builder exercise where you are playing a half-step exercise without a breath in the middle. I'm going to demonstrate it. You are actually achieving a long diminuendo and then a long crescendo. I'll play it and then we'll talk a little bit more about it. Sure if my system here, it could be that my GoPro has an automatic level adjustment here and you wouldn't be able to tell what my dynamics are, but I started fortissimo and I diminuendoed through 2 notes to pianissimo, and then I reattacked the note without breath, and then I started crescendo on that note, and then I went up a half step and continued the crescendo to the end. And that's crucial because you want to see how much air you have left as you do that crescendo at the end. Now, the cool thing about this exercise is that it can be easy, moderate, very difficult. And you actually want to challenge yourself to failure just as you do when you're weightlifting. If you're lifting a barbell, a dumbbell, you want to not lift your lightest weight and easy because you're not gaining anything from that. You don't want to lift your heaviest weight and not be able to pick it up off the floor because you're not gaining anything from that. You want to be able to have about 8 or 10 successful reps and then be at failure point. So what do I mean when I talk about weightlifting in relationship to this exercise? Well, we take a tempo that is the appropriate 8 or 10 rep tempo. In other words, are we doing 4 clicks for each note, 2 clicks for each note, 6 clicks for each note? How long are we going to make each note last? I say clicks thinking rather fast quarter note clicks. The reason I do that instead of just saying slow the tempo down, say it's written in half notes and I'm going to take it real slow, because I don't think you can pace the diminuendo and the crescendo quite as accurately, as carefully as when you are thinking clicks and you know, for example, that you might have 4 fast clicks to do the taper of the first note, 4 additional ones to get down to the softest point, re-attack that note and come back up. So that's my air builder exercise. And caution, and the last point maybe I'll make is that you need to realize mid to high notes on a brass instrument take more velocity of air, and mid to low notes take more volume of air. So quite frankly, as you begin to do exercises with the instrument, for example, just holding a long tone is a good breath exercise on the horn. Lower note long tones are not going to want to last as long as mid to higher note ones. Or if you do this air builder exercise mid to high range, you're going to find that you're able to hold longer than if you come down chromatically and choose a low area in which to play that drill. So hopefully that's a little bit of helpful information on breathing for the brasses. I'm sure there are many other topics we can hit. I hope that you'll watch this video and then ask me in class if you have any questions, comments, or whatever. Maybe you have some great exercises that you want to share with me. Maybe you have some additional pointers about how vocalists breathe, how that may compare or contrast to brass players' use of air. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in class.